Throughout NBA history, there have been a handful of amazing teams with multiple star-level players that have dominated the league. We know these teams as super teams. At the same token, there have been even more teams who've tried to emulate the success by stacking their team with big names, only to fall short. And this begs the question, should teams be striving for these big names to make their own super teams, or are they shooting themselves in the foot by doing this? When done correctly, a super team could lead your team to have a ton of success and even possibly build a dynasty with you winning multiple championships year after year after year. However, on the other side of that token, if done incorrectly, this could set your franchise back for multiple years. A lot of failed super teams end up having the exact same issues, whether it be not knowing their personnel, completely gutting their roster to get the names onto their team, or just simply not making a super team that's good enough to even have the mantra super team, a big three of mid-level stars. I'm going to be talking about those points in this video. Let's get into it. Over 90% of the people that watch my content are not subscribed, so if you're messing with the videos, please hit that sub button and the noti bell so you'll get notified every time I upload. But let's get back to the hoops. The first point that I want to get into is not knowing your personnel, and I feel like this can be split into many different ways, but I'm going to focus on two ways. And the first way can definitely be found in Kevin Durant's last couple of teams. KD has gone to two teams and has requested stars that have both been injury prone. Knowing that these guys may or may not be on the floor, that being said, I think it's a very risky move to build your team around players that you do not know if they will be playing come postseason. This is the same issue that the Clippers have been having year after year after year with Kawhi or PG or both ending up not playing in the playoffs. And then with the Phoenix Suns this season are having that same issue with Bradley Beal being out every other game, KD missing a lot of time, and we all know the Brooklyn Nets also had this problem with Kevin Durant. So making sure you build a team with players that are going to be on the court is absolutely one of the most important factors when building a roster. The other side to knowing your personnel is just making sure that you're not forcing pieces that don't fit together on the same team. You saw this a couple years ago with the Los Angeles Lakers when they made that trade for Russell Westbrook. And I was a person who believed that great players will just make it work. And that was clearly the opposite on that team when you saw Russell Westbrook and the fact that he just did not mesh well with LeBron and AD. They did not have enough spacing, not enough shooting, not enough defense between the three of them to really anchor that team and bring them to a new height. You must have a team that you know will fit those players, and that's when the most successful super teams really shine. If you go back and look at the Golden State Warriors, yes, you can say the Warriors just brought the best player available, but that best player also came to a team where the spacing was amazing, they had defensive players, they knew who was going to play make, and they didn't completely gut their bench in order to get that player. And that brings me to my next point. A lot of super teams will completely ruin their depth in order to get those big names. Now, if you look at a team like the Phoenix Suns, like I said earlier, they wanted Bradley Beal, they wanted KD, they traded Mikal Bridges, Cam Johnson, DeAndre Ayton, Chris Paul. So now they're left with their big three and a bunch of players who really could be rotated in and out at any point in time. I don't think that they have a consistent five or a consistent six man or somebody that they can bring off the bench who's going to be good on a game-to-game basis. It's very much up in the air who's going to be helping out their big three or big two, because a lot of the time their big three is not even on the court together. So I feel like having depth is very important. You can go look at the Oklahoma City Thunder, who fit both of these points so far. Not only did they have a big three of Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and Paul George, who I don't think fit together very well at all. Those are all guys who need the ball in their hand. Maybe Paul George needs it a bit less, but you very much saw that with Carmelo Anthony's play. You can say he was getting old, but the fact of the matter is Melo needed the ball in his hands, and when you have Westbrook holding up a whole lot of the touches, Paul George taking up pretty much the rest of them, and using Carmelo Anthony as a spot up, it's not going to work. And then you also look at the fact that they had no bench. They traded all their pieces for PG and Melo in the same offseason, so they really didn't have much. Not to say that their bench was very good to begin with, but they had something there. They made the playoffs with that core, even though it was mostly Westbrook. But even so, they traded all those pieces. They have their three stars, and they just didn't really have much to back it up. So when playoff time came and the big three didn't fit and they didn't have the depth to back them up, it just was not a very good look. Lastly, and what I feel like is the biggest culprit for failed super teams, is just making super teams out of players that simply aren't good enough. Some teams don't have the assets to really get those upper echelon players, so they settle for bringing multiple all-stars onto their team, and they think that that will work. The most recent example of this that I can remember is actually the current Chicago Bulls roster when they added DeMar DeRozan and Nikola Vucevic, and they really thought that that was going to be there's this magnum opus of a team, and it really just wasn't. When you look at that team, I don't think anybody really looked at them and said DeMar DeRozan, Nikola Vucevic, and Zach LaVine are going to the championship. Although their first season together before Lonzo Ball got hurt, they were a very good team. They've made the playoffs, but I never looked at them as a team who's going to be a hard contender. And simply making a big three out of what you have and the pieces that you have, I don't think is the way to go. I feel like if you cannot make the best super team possible, or something where you feel like you're going from a contender to we're absolutely going to the finals, and if we don't, it's a failure, you should not dabble in trying to make a super team. You should absolutely try to organically build your roster. If super teams aren't the way to go, obviously building an organic roster is the way to go, in my opinion, and I feel like the NBA is definitely trending in that direction. The past 3 champions are all organic teams. They did not build them. They do not have this overwhelming amount of star power. They just have their stars, 1 or 2 stars, and they have a great supporting cast. You can look at the Nuggets. They have Murray. They have Jokic. They have, you want to put MPJ in there, you can, and then they had a great supporting cast with Bruce Brown, Aaron Gordon, Chris Brown, and a lot of other players. You can look at the Bucks, who had Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Drew. I don't consider Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday to be like enough to make a super team. I feel like that was a big 3, if you want to call it that, but it really was Giannis spearheading that offense and then everyone else picking up the pieces and playing as a unit. And if you look at the Warriors obviously are not the same team that they were in 2017, 2018. That was really Steph Curry going off and really carrying a lot of that heavy load like he was doing back in 2015-16. The second best player in that finals run was Andrew Wiggins, so that tells you enough. But that roster definitely was not a super team. It was built organically. I feel like building organic teams is trending in the right direction. And if you even look at NBA history, I feel like a lot of teams were built organically that ended up winning championships. You can look at all of the San Antonio Spurs rings because they never went and built a super team. If you look at the Lakers, when they won their championships, it was with the organic teams. It wasn't with the teams that they tried to stack the deck. When they did try to stack it, it did not work. And they tried that twice. They tried Kobe, Shaq, Gary Payton, and Karl Malone, and they failed. And then they tried Kobe, Pau Gasol, Dwight Howard, and Steve Nash, and then they failed again. When they won their championships is when Kobe was at the helm with Shaq, or when Kobe was at the helm with Pau Gasol, and that really shows that a lot of these super team experiences and experiments just don't work, and you should try to build your team with the assets that you have coming in organically, and building a team when you're trading for pieces that will help your team, trading for pieces that fit into your roster construction, trading for pieces that fit into your system, instead of just trading for the biggest name possible. Like I said before, when you build a good big 3, like the Miami Heat big 3, when you have 2 players that are clearly some of the best in the league, and then you have another all-star to back them up, that's going to work. When you look at the Warriors had 2 clear best players in the league, Steph Curry and KD, and then they had Clay and Draymond, who are also 2 all-stars. That's going to work. When you look at the Celtics, when they brought in Rondo, KG, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen, those are 4 players that all fit together very well. They're going to play defense, they're going to pass, and that molded very well and fast for them, and they got a championship out of it. So some super teams will work, but I feel like throughout history, most of the time, the organically built teams are going to win, and the super teams are going to fall short. So I feel like building your team and making sure you have your star, your backup pieces, your role players, and your depth is a much better way to go in terms of getting a championship.